Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. As you can see, we're fishing a bridge right now. So I figured I'd do a quick tutorial on how I like to break down bridges, because in my opinion, there's 4 specific areas to look. So I'm gonna walk you through all 4 of those areas and tell you how and what baits I like to fish around those areas. The first thing I want to point out though is, generally speaking, bridges are going to be on pinch points. Now, the bridge I've got here is just across the main river, so there is no actual pinch point, but most bridges are built around areas where you've got a pinch point. And that's just generally you get a narrowing of the shore. The bridge is easier to build and therefore they use it. But that pinch point acts as a really good place for current and just a really good travel route. You've got fish that generally are moving to and from places, so they're going up and down the current, moving up those channels that the bridges are over. So bridges are excellent places to fish. And because of that, you got to recognize the different types of bridges, how they're set up, how the water's moving through them to position the fish. But the four main areas that we got to look at, the first thing is always your shoreline. So generally speaking, you're going to have a riprap bank that extends out onto that pinch point. So you generally have points. I don't have points here, as you can see, but we still do have some rock up on the bank. And that rock is an attractor in itself, because this bank is a sand bank. All of a sudden we got rock. There's going to be fish that are relating to that rock. At the same time, if it is a point, what that point means is you're going to have 2 key places on each of those riprap points that stick out. Both the upstream and downstream corner, which is its own little point, are going to be high percentage places. So both on the left and right side of the bridge, you're generally going to have an upstream and downstream place on those corners. Now, I will say, generally speaking, the time of year dictates which corner is going to be better. If you're talking about warm water periods, the upstream corner where the current hits first is going to be better. If you're talking about cold water period, your downstream point, or the one that doesn't have the current coming on it but actually has a current seam, is generally going to be better. Any of the baits that you normally would fish, say on riprap, can be good. A jig, a crankbait, all kinds of different things can be really good baits. I just got bit off by a pike. So the 2 points are going to be really good. Your corners, like I said, your crankbaits, your jigs, your Ned rigs, anything that you want to fish, as I grab another rod, will be pretty usable. And you're generally going to be cranking or casting those corners. The main thing to look for on those points are going to be the current breaks, or maybe you've got a rock, or maybe you've got a log, something like that, that is actually coming and attracting the fish. So your corners are huge places, and those are honestly the most hit places to fish as well, because a lot of times you're talking about just having shore fishermen that are set up in those places. So it can be difficult to fish them, but generally those are your really easy high percentage places. The next thing then that you're going to look for are your pillars. The pillars are obvious places to fish. I think they go less fished because a lot of them, like these out here in the middle, people assume are too deep. The reality is you're always going to have some fish that are suspended on those different pillars. So even if your pillars are in 50 or 60 foot of water, you may have fish that are only 2 feet down. So that's something really critical to pay attention to. And the key with those pillars is they act as current breaks. A pillar is a great place for the fish to get some shade, to sit out of the current, to ambush prey. So if you've got a lot of bait fish moving up and down that creek channel, like you get on your pinch points, then you're talking about definitely wanting to fish your pillars. Now, I will say, generally, there's some pillars that are better than others. Some pillars, it's a certain depth zone that's right. Sometimes it's just ones that tend to a little walleye grabbing the tail. Sometimes it's just ones that are set up in the current right, and that can change based on location. So just keep that in mind. But your pillars are definite high percentage objects to fish. Sometimes they're on the bottom, sometimes they're suspended really high. It's up to the angler I got a bunch of walleyes, I think. Up to the angler to figure out like how to go ahead and fish the pillar. I really like to fish more suspending baits, generally a jerk bait. Maybe it's a little swim bait. Something along those lines can be really good just in terms of getting those suspended fish. Sometimes a spoon can be really good if you're fishing a spoon. The other thing I do like to do is take some plastics, whether it's a jig or a Texas rig or a Ned rig, and throw them right against the wall and then let it just fall down along the wall, because a lot of the fish are going to be really tight to those pillars. So that's a second key strike zone. The third is often really overlooked, and that's your shade line. So on a sunny day, you can see this bridge up here is casting a shade line, and that shade line is going to move throughout the day. But a lot of fish, especially in areas that don't have, let's see, oh, a little small now. In areas that don't have a lot of cover, the shade can be absolutely dynamite. And in areas that don't have a lot of current, because in areas that don't have a lot of current, the fish can set up better out in the middle and chase bait that are suspended and sitting in those shade areas. So your shade lines can be absolutely critical, especially on really deep, clear bodies of water where you have a lot of suspended bass. Spotted bass are notorious for using the pillars, but getting out and just roaming the shade lines. We've got a lot of little taps right now. So those shade lines are really good. You can fish them again with the same baits you'd fish around the pillars. Generally, you know, you're going to be talking about your swim baits, your crankbait, a jerk bait, anything fishing for those suspended fish is really what you're looking for. Get a new bait. But it's often completely, what I would say, underfished and overlooked by the anglers. It's just one of those things where those shade lines actually act as the cover. Now, the other thing to note with the shade lines is you're going to have a moving object throughout the day. So, you know, in this case, the shade line, the sun is, I'm going to say, I don't know, it's still morning. It's only 9 o'clock, so it's still low. And as the sun rotates, that shade line is going to move. So there are times when that shade line actually comes in contact with bottom structure or certain pieces of structure, whether it's a log or a laydown or a pillar, and those will be your key times because the shade is hitting that object. A later part in the day, if the shade line is somewhere else, it may not be as good, but there may be a different object that's good. So you want to pay attention to when you get bit on your shade lines throughout the day. Okay. The last thing you always want to pay attention to anytime you're fishing bridges, stuff like that, guys. Do you see that big tree that's caught over there? Doesn't have to be on the surface, but bridges notoriously have a lot of debris in the water. When they built the bridges, there's a lot of stuff that fell in the water. When if they built the bridge where there was an old bridge, a lot of the old bridge falls in the water. You also then, because it's a current pinch point, you have a lot of objects like that tree that get stuck either on the bottom or get stuck on some of the pillars like that one is. And they provide very high percentage areas that can be really good to fish. Now those, most of the time, unless they're visible like that one, you can scan the area and find little brush piles and rock piles and debris that have fallen in over the years. But don't overlook that. So it doesn't have to be a visible object, because there's a lot of debris. If I were to scan this and show you, there's a lot of random debris that's just kind of hanging around out here. And from that standpoint, those provide great fish habitats. So those are the 4 main areas to look, guys. Bridges are high percentage areas that generally have big populations of fish that live around them. So if you're able to fish one in your area, I highly recommend to give it a try. Man, they can be really good. Let me know in the comments section, what are some of your favorite baits to fish bridges? And if you enjoyed today's video, let me know that too. I can do more quick on the water tutorials like this. It's just a really easy way to show you specifically some of the things to be looking for. And I'm gonna go back to fishing the bridge here see if I can't catch a few more fish. And thanks for watching, guys. Hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. Stay tuned. We'll have a new video coming out tomorrow.